I want to begin with a special exclusive this morning. Two top senators on the Foreign Relations Committee together. Democratic Chairman Bob Menendez of New Jersey and the Republican ranking member Jim Risch of Idaho. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me this morning. Mr. Chairman, I'll start with you. We have heard some stark warnings about a possible invasion from top American officials. The Ukrainian president is urging the U.S. to stop those dire warnings, saying it might cause panic in his country. Why is the U.S. assessment of what the Ukrainians are saying so different?
Well, good morning, Dana, and good to be with you and my friend and colleague, Jim Risch. Look, I think that President Zelensky is in a difficult position. Clearly, he must be preparing for the possibility of invasion or re-invasion, since Russia did that already in the past with Crimea and with irregular forces in eastern Ukraine. But at the same time, he wants to create a semblance of calm as it relates to his economy, which is a challenge for him as well. So I understand that, but there is a reason that President Biden has sent more aid to Ukraine, military aid, lethal aid, since 2014, $650 million. It's because you have 130,000 Russian troops. They are surrounding 3 different parts of Russia's borders, and you have to take seriously that the potential for an invasion is real. And so it's getting the Ukrainians to be prepared and to give them the wherewithal to defend themselves, at the same time understanding the economic needs that they have.
And Senator Risch, you've said that Russia is just setting up a pretext for war. Do you see any scenario in which Russia chooses not to invade at this point?
Well, I don't think that decision's been made yet. There's a lot of us that believe that if Putin sees weakness, if he sees bumbling, if he sees ineptitude, if he sees indecision, that he will take advantage of that. I don't think he's made a decision to do that yet. What Bob and I and a coalition of bipartisan senators are attempting to do is to project the resolve that we have as Americans to see that he doesn't do that, to provide the strength, to project the strength, and convince him that this would be a very, very bad idea and it's going to be extremely painful. This is not the same as the Crimea when he did this last time. There is substantially more worldwide opposition to his thoughts this time.
And let's talk about what you just mentioned, Senator Risch. Chairman Menendez, you are working together. The two of you are leading a broader discussion, bipartisan discussion, to put together legislation to sanction Russia. The Ukrainians have written the two of you and the broader group specifically asking for help. So how close are you to a deal on this legislation?
Well, Senator Risch and I have been working with our staffs and colleagues, a bipartisan coalition, both on the Foreign Relations Committee and members off of the committee, in a intensive effort over the last week. I would describe it as that we are on the 1-yard line, and hopefully we will be able to conclude successfully. What there is no doubt is that there is an incredible bipartisan resolve for support of Ukraine, and a incredibly strong bipartisan resolve to have severe consequences for Russia if it invades Ukraine, and in some cases for what it has already done. And so what I would say is what we are devising, building upon the legislation that both Senator Risch wrote independently and I wrote, which I call the mother of all sanctions. It's to include a variety of elements, massive sanctions against the most significant Russian banks, crippling to their economy, meaningful in terms of consequences to the average Russian and their accounts and pensions, more lethal assistance to Ukraine, the ability to deal with Russia's sovereign debt, to look at sectoral elements of Russia's economy, which is largely an extracting economy on energy, to sanction its sovereign debt. These are sanctions beyond any that we have ever levied before.
Right.
And I think that that sends a very clear message.
Right. And Senator Risch, how do you get from the 1-yard line into the end zone, to keep the metaphor that the chairman just talked about? Specifically, if I may, given the fact that you and other Republicans, you want the sanctions to take effect now. The Biden administration, they want to wait until after any invasion. They say that's their best deterrent. How are you going to compromise on that?
Well, first of all, I think that Bob's description is a very good description of what's happened and where we are. This has been a 24-hour-a-day effort for the last several days. And as always with these things, people have different ideas of how to get to where they want to get to. Now, if you have two things on almost any problem, you can resolve it. Number one, if you have parties on each side wanting to reach the same objective, and number two, both sides are working in good faith. If you have both of those, there's no reason you can't get to the finish line.
So you will get there?
As Bob described. We think so. I'm more than cautiously optimistic at this point that when we get back to D.C. tomorrow, that we're going to be moving forward, and I know Bob shares that.
What are you going
shares that hope also.
What are you going to do about the timing of the sanctions? Will you say that they will not go into effect until after an invasion, if that happens, or will you do it preemptively? Mr. Chairman?
That's a work in progress, but I can describe where we've come together on that, and I think it's a combination of both. Bob, would you agree with that?
Yeah, I'd agree with Senator Risch. Look, there are some sanctions that really could take place up front because of what Russia's already done. Cyber attacks on Ukraine, false flag operations, the efforts to undermine the Ukrainian government internally. Those are just some examples of sanctions that could take place now. But then the devastating sanctions that ultimately would crush Russia's economy and the continuing lethal aid that we are going to send, which means Putin has to decide how many body bags of Russian sons are going to return to Russia. The sanctions that we're talking about would come later on if he invades. Some sanctions would come up front for what has been done already, but the lethal aid will travel no matter what.
And quickly, Senator Risch, the issue of the Nord Stream 2 pipeline between Russia and Germany, the administration is reluctant to do anything to block that. Will you have in this legislation, will you actually take action?
Well, as you know, we've had a disagreement on that, a continuing disagreement since the administration took office. But look, there's been something happen on the ground that has changed the dynamics and opened the door really for us to reach agreement on that. And that is that the Germans have signaled that they are suspending, pausing, if you would, certification, thus completion of the pipeline for 6 months or till late summer in any event. That gives us the opportunity to work with that idea. Certainly, we should be in at least as good a position as they are, and that is sanctioning until that period of time. So we're working on that. I think that's that's going to be the last T crossed, I dotted before we put the ball across the finish line.
And Chairman Menendez, are you still in favor of removing Russia from what's known as SWIFT, which is the global financial system that connects thousands of banks?
I am. I believe all options need to be on the table. The president can exert that option, or he could target it against very significant Russian banks, would have a crippling effect on Russia's economy. So I believe giving the president the total arsenal of tools, sanctions, the expedited delivery of lethal weapons, the dealing with the misinformation that Russia is generating, the cyber attacks, all of that is envisioned in our legislation, and it is a comprehensive and powerful approach that says to Putin, you have a choice, diplomacy or conflict. If it's conflict, you will pay a devastating price.
And Senator Risch, some conservative personalities, even some sitting GOP lawmakers, they're questioning why the U.S. is helping Ukraine at all. I want you to take a listen.
Why is it disloyal to side with Russia, but loyal to side with Ukraine? Ukraine is strategically irrelevant to the United States. He just wants to keep his western border secure. That's why he doesn't want Ukraine to join NATO. And that makes sense.
Senator, as one of the top Republicans on this issue in Congress, what do you say to that?
Well, I think, first of all, when you have a country like the Ukraine, which wants to move west and look towards Western values, that is a democracy, we side always with countries that are democracies. And certainly there isn't going to be troops committed in that regard. But I'll tell you, the people who are saying that we shouldn't be engaged in this at all are going to be singing a very different tune when they go to fill up their car with gas, if indeed there is an invasion by Russia. Because as Bob pointed out, there are going to be sanctions that are going to be crippling to Russia. It is going to cripple their oil production. And as we all know, Russia is simply a gas station that is masquerading, thinly disguised masquerading as a country. This is going to have a devastating effect on the economy around the world when it comes to the price of gasoline. If you're someone who doesn't care about the price of gasoline or oil, that's fine. But if you do have a concern about the quality of life for people all over the world, this is something always you have to consider, and you always have to take these things into consideration, particularly when you're sympathy and trying to help democratic countries.
And as I wrap
Dana,
this, please go ahead.
Dana, a brief comment on that. Listen, this is beyond Ukraine. Although certainly we, dramatically support Ukraine, we cannot have a Munich moment again. Putin will not stop with Ukraine if he believes that the West will not respond. We saw what he did in 2008 in Georgia. We saw what he did in 2014 and pursued Crimea. He will not stop. And so at the end of the day, this is about defending Ukraine, but it's also about sending a message. You can't by force change the boundaries of a country. You can't by force tell them they cannot look westward.
Mr. Chairman, you are confident that you will have a
question.
Go ahead.
There's no question about that. And if it wasn't for NATO, the Baltic countries would be gone already, and there'd be worse problems on the other side. So Bob's absolutely right in that this isn't a place where there's going to be just some action and it's going to quit. At some point in time, there's got to be a line.
Thank you both for joining. It sounds like the answer is yes. You believe that you will get a bipartisan deal on this mother of all sanctions bill, to quote you, Chairman Menendez. You'll do it this week?
I believe that we will get there. We have been working in good faith. We've been accommodating different views, and we are committed jointly in a bipartisan way to defend Ukraine and to send Putin a message. It'll be bloody and consequential.
Thank you. A very important moment. Thank you both for coming on and coming on together. I really appreciate it.